Hi, and welcome back to the Contemporary Old West with B.F. Biles. If you enjoy Westerns, I hope you'll hit the subscribe and notification icons. I truly appreciate your support. If you're enjoying the story and you're interested in a signed copy of my novel, Hunting Charm, you can check my Amazon page or email me directly. Again, any support is deeply appreciated. In today's episode, you'll hear part 1 of Chapter 9 of my novel, Hunting Charm. If you haven't heard the previous chapters, I recommend you do so. I have the first 8 chapters in a playlist. It's probably best you start with Chapter 1. In today's Plate of History Beans, I'll continue with my look at Indian territory in the 19th century. This time I'll focus on the Chisholm Trail, one of the notable roads used by Texas ranchers to take their cattle and other livestock into Kansas for a brief period during the mid to late years of the 19th century. So without further abuse or ado, here's part 1 of Chapter 9 of my novel Hunting Charm, Nakona and Sam. Chapter 9, Hunting Charm, Nakona and Sam. Matt and Brent left on a cool summer morning riding south, hoping to skirt along the border between the untamed Comanche-ruled Texas Panhandle and the marginally more settled Indian territory of Oklahoma. Brent felt relieved to be leaving. He had spent the previous 2 days swearing that his time as a no-count drunk was behind him, though he had no idea if he could uphold such a pledge. He felt such misery recollecting his mother's tearful condemnation at the party. He tried repeatedly to make amends, chopping wood and doing several chores Fred Tucker said he couldn't get done because of his old fart status. Unfortunately, his mother seemed unconvinced by his labor and heartfelt promises. She had heard similar pledges from his father 100 times and merely nodded at her son's assurance, replying with something like, "Your daddy swore off drinking once a month for 20-odd years," or, "I reckon swearing off drinking will keep you sober for a while. Your daddy quit for several months one time." Meanwhile, Matt made the final arrangements for their departure, visiting the store in Ulysses several times for supplies. He decided against a wagon. They would take pack mules and horses instead. They were bound for central Indian territory where roads, if they existed at all, rarely consisted of anything more than a pair of dusty ruts across the prairie. The mules would carry tents, bedding, water, and provisions, and would allow them to traverse all but the roughest terrain. When they rode out early on a Tuesday late in May, Doreen had been gone from Abilene for nearly 2 months. As he always did, Matt began thinking aloud as they rode along, explaining the information he had gathered thus far. So these 2 brothers, the Baylor twins, left from Abilene without a clue as to where they were going. They rode to the west end of Kansas before they turned south. I reckon they figured to follow the Chisholm Trail, but they went too far. They ran into a pack of Comanche and lost their extra mule team and some bacon. Bart, the brother who lost his arm, told me how the Comanche took their bacon several times. At any rate, those native folks pointed them east, and Hunter Brantley listened with half an ear, figuring that if he missed any details, Matt would repeat them several times. The morning sun felt fine, and so far the days were cool and comfortable. In Brant's opinion, spring provided good traveling weather. So they head east cross-country through breaks and riverbeds and such, slow going. In there somewhere, Bart... Did I mention those boys are fat as hogs? Anyway, Bart takes a bullet in his left arm. He wasn't hurt too bad because he wasn't dead several days later when they showed up in Abilene, except his arm was festered. He kept talking about the damn bacon, not making much sense. The doc had already cut off his arm to the shoulder. It's a nice morning, listen to them birds singing. Hunter hoped by calling attention to the scenery, Matt might finish up his talk about fat men and amputations. So the question is, how did Bart Baylor get himself shot? Bucky says that Bart was shot by Cecil Johnson, but the story is shaky. The doctor said Bart had been shot for at least 10 days, and it only took them 6 or 7 days to get from Johnson's place back to Abilene. At least 2 days difference. 2 days ain't that much difference, Brant said. Fair enough. Let's say the doctor was right, though. Why would the Baylors be lying about how Bart took that bullet? Dang it, Matt, would you just relax for 10 minutes? My brain works better in conjunction with my mouth. I thought we were tracking a colored man that killed a white woman. I ain't certain yet that he killed her. Didn't the man that hired you say that's what's happened? Yes, sir. Then why ain't you sure? Well, I don't believe the Baylors found the gal's body. Did they claim they found her body? They did, except Bart, the one with the bad arm, said they didn't. Then he said they did. I think I believed him when he said they didn't see her body. Why is that? Instincts. So you ain't sure she killed, or they ain't sure she was killed? You're not listening, Hunter. The Baylor brothers claimed they saw she was killed, except Bart, before he said she was killed, said he never saw her body. Long story short, I ain't got nothing but their word that she's dead. I mean, there ain't no specific reason to doubt their word. They had an undershirt of Doreen's, though it weren't much more than a rag of a thing. What makes you think the Baylors might be lying? Well, like I said, they lied about how Bart was shot. Maybe, Bart reminded. You weren't there for the questions. The Baylors lied about the gunshot. That I'm 99% sure of. On top of that, Johnson wasn't a likely candidate to kill a white woman. Ex-soldier, honorable service record, successful business raising and selling livestock, not the killer type. Trying to enjoy the ride, Matt. I can see you're interested. I ain't interested. Well, you're arguing with me about it, so you heard some of what I was saying. How the hell can I avoid hearing it? You're right there, and I'm right here, and shit. All right, I'm a little interested. Thing is, it's clear you don't think this colored man killed that white woman, but the stuff about the Baylors lying about the gunshot seems flimsy. That's all I'm saying. That's true. Of course, we can't be sure of anything. The Baylors may have killed Doreen Tarwater themselves. Oh, your damn theorizing is getting ridiculous. Fair enough. I don't imagine the Baylors killed her. Matt pulled up his horse, examining their surroundings. Where do you reckon we are right now? You think this is Indian territory? More likely Comanche, Texas Panhandle. We've been traveling due south the whole way from Ulysses. Hunter pulled his mount to a stop. Why? Well, I wouldn't mind talking with those Comanche that stopped the Baylors if we can find them. Matt, Brant fluttered his lips in disgust. You can't just find a damn Indian unless he finds you. If you recall, we spent 3 weeks looking for that man who took that woman into New Mexico. We damn near killed our horses. You said yourself that you don't find a Comanche finds you. The Baylors said that they ran into a bunch near here. Quanah said he'd take their scalps if he caught them hunting any buffalo. We could set up to hunt buffalo, and Quanah would find us. What? Brent gawked at Matt. Quanah says he'll scalp you if you hunt buffalo, and you're saying we should set up to hunt buffalo to draw the attention of the feller who said he'd kill you for hunting buffalo? What the hell, Matt? We wouldn't actually be hunting buffalo. What if Quanah just rides up and starts scalping? Damn Comanche shot up Kit Carson and his bunch there by the Canadian River a few years back. Those folks ain't friendly, Matt. That was over 10 years ago, and Quanah wasn't even around as far as anyone knows. Matt dismounted and began stretching. Riders inflate things. Quanah probably ain't killed nobody except maybe one or two, just for a warning. One or two is pretty good warning. Oh no, hell no. Get back on your horse. Matt, we ain't gonna camp here in the middle of wild Comanche territory. It ain't gonna happen. It's beautiful country. The wildflowers have the pasture looking like a fine Persian rug. Makes a feller want to kick back and relax for a spell. I'm gonna kick somebody's backside if they don't get on their horse. We ain't camping here. I need to speak with Chief Parker if we're to settle this case properly. We'll just rest here for a day or two, look around some. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't find us before too long. Oh, for Christ's sake. First off, we could spend 2 or 3 months here. Quanah could be 500 miles away in Arizona territory or something. He's not in Arizona. He stays mostly in these parts. He could be in Paris, France. Brant stretched himself in the saddle, squinting into the afternoon sunlight. Admittedly, Matt had chosen a good spot for a camp. They had stopped along a sandy creek bottom. There was even a little water flowing. Brant, where the water could be scarce in the Texas Panhandle, considered the lateness of the hour and his own growling stomach. He slowly eased off his mount. I reckon we could stay for one night. At least we can get the horses watered good. Thank you, Hunter. They made camp beneath a stand of cottonwoods on a grassy embankment near the edge of the stream. After staking his tent, Matt gathered firewood while Brent took up his rifle, thinking he might bring down a jackrabbit or prairie chicken for dinner. He wandered along the creek watching minnows dart about in a pool, the silvery fish schooling and shifting like dancers. Tired from the long day's ride, he propped his gun against an oak, removed his boots, and waded into the cool water, enjoying the feel of the sand as it compressed between his toes. He settled beneath a tall rock and, lulled by the chirr of cicadas, dozed. In his dream he held Ruth Plinko in his arms, and for once words came easily. She smiled, and as they conversed and danced to the strains of a fiddle and guitar, the time flowed by with such ease he wished the night would never end. Then they shared a gentle kiss beneath an old elm tree. He wanted the moment to last forever, but then, as dreams do, things changed, and Brant found himself on a rocky outcropping, looking down at dozens of Indian teepees standing alongside a narrow stream. With a start, he realized he wasn't alone and turned. At his side rested a gigantic puma. Despite the proximity of the dangerous prairie cat, Brent felt unconcerned. Somehow, he knew this animal would do him no harm. Then the puma snarled, and Brant awoke. In today's plate of history beans, I'll continue my look at Indian territory in the 19th century. This time we'll examine one of the most storied of the cattle roads that for a brief time were a way for cattlemen in Texas to capitalize upon their hard work. It's difficult to overstate the importance of cattle trails and their contribution to the lore associated with the Old West. The most famous of these trails, the Chisholm, fits neatly within the time frame of my novel, Hunting Charm, for a period of less than 5 years, from around 1867 until 1872. Thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of cattle were driven from Texas through Oklahoma to the small Kansas town of Abilene, where they were loaded onto trail cars for Chicago and other meatpacking facilities in Ohio, Kansas, and other points east. During that time, Abilene, one of the wildest cow towns in history and worthy of a history plate of beans all its own, flourished. A few men, like Theo Tarwater from Hunting Charm, became wealthy overnight thanks to the cattle boom. Firstly, it's important to understand that the Chisholm Trail wasn't a clearly delineated road in the sense of what we think of as a road nowadays. Take a look at this map. Notice how the trail has a number of points of origin in Texas, follows roughly the same path through Oklahoma, then ends in Abilene and the Kansas Pacific Railroad. The trail is named after a multiracial half-Cherokee man named Jesse Chisholm. He developed the trail for his own use and was the first to use the trail to take his own livestock to market in Abilene. In addition, a man named Joe McCoy helped develop the trail and worked with the Kansas Pacific Railroad to develop cattle cars to transport livestock on from Abilene to points northeast and later west into Colorado. Many people at the time actually called the trail the McCoy Trail. But why did they need the trail in the first place? During the mid-19th century, Texas ranchers were faced with a dilemma. Their cattle weren't worth much in Texas, maybe $4 or $5 a head. But if you could get them into Kansas, the animals could be sold for around $40 each, an amount worth the risk associated with a weeks-long journey cross country. For many years, farmers in North Texas and tribal farmers in Indian Territory did not want large herds of cattle traveling through their lands. Not only did the animals trample crops, but the hardy longhorn breed is known to spread disease and ticks. A single herd passing through a farmer's land could ruin his entire year, his entire livelihood. So Jesse Chisholm's trail was highly prized. It filled a need and made a risky trip possible. Cattle drovers along the Chisholm Trail faced a number of difficulties. Their drives, which often took place in the late spring when rivers will rise thanks to the spring rains, had to cross the Red River, the Washita, the north and south branches of the Canadian, and if you started far enough south in Texas, the Brazos. Cattle drives could take up to 2 months to complete, pushing the journey often into the early summer months when blazing temperatures and humid weather made riding all day on horseback challenging. Now, I have never been on a cattle drive, but as a boy I was raised on a ranch, and there was more than a time or two whenever I had to sit on a horse for a good part of the day. Believe me, after 2 or 3 hours, I was whining about the deal. Riding a horseback for extended periods of time is no easy thing. More than one cowboy on these cattle drives, thanks to the heat, succumbed to heat stroke on these journeys and died in the saddle. Even though the Chisholm Trail was used for fewer than 20 years, its influence upon Western lore is profound. Not only have there been dozens of movies made about cattle drives, including the iconic Red River, starring John Wayne and Montgomery Clift and directed by one of the finest filmmakers of that era, Howard Hawks, but cattle drives give us a host of stories about wild cow towns in Kansas, places like Dodge City, Abilene, Wichita, Newton, Hayes, Salina, and Coffeyville. You could almost say that our notions about the Old West wouldn't exist without cattle drives and the wild towns that sprang up in Kansas to serve the cattle industry. The cattle drive is a truly unique element of the Old West and probably gave us all sorts of tropes we now associated with that iconic part of history. The brave marshal, showdowns, saloon brawls, none of those would likely exist without the Chisholm Trail and the legacy of cattle drives. One element, the gunslinger, the largely fictional duels that appear in so many TV shows and movies, loom especially large in the imagination of Western fans. It was the cattle drives, with their groups of hardened cattle hands arriving after weeks on the trail with money in their pockets, that gave birth to stories of roughhousing and gunslinging in the Old West. That's it for today's plate of history beans on the Chisholm Trail. If you're interested in learning more about cattle drives and their significance in the formation of our romantic notions of the Old West, I'll place a few links in the description below. Included is an Oklahoma State travel guide if you're interested in seeing some of the same country these men traveled through during their time. I hope you'll take a moment to click the like and subscribe button and join me again next week. Another chapter from my novel Hunting Charm and another plate of history beans. For now, this has been the Contemporary Old West with B.F. Biles.